You've seen some of the highlights here of your career, but I got a sense that there's one guy you just didn't want to get in the ring with. That one person that you said, I don't want a piece of. And why don't you tell us who that might be?
Well, Greg, a lot of people might be surprised by this, but that'd be Tim the Swede Magnuson.
Yeah.
This guy's been on my back for my entire career, and he's been giving me hell. So he's the guy I fear the most. Yeah. Yeah. Is he here? Tim here?
Where is it? Lights up. Is
Maybe
Magnuson here? The guy
after lunch? Tim?
Florida a week ago and aren't back yet. That's why I got this autograph.
Well, I knew he'd duck me again. I knew he would duck me again. This is kind of like, did you guys ever see Inside the Actor's Studio? James Lipton? It's kind of like that show. It's pretty neat. I like it. Only I don't act.
By the way, congratulations on your new position.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it.
We look forward to having you down here in this part of the world in that capacity.
Good. I will be representing this area, all of Western New York. So I'm very, very excited about this job. It's much like what I'm doing here, and much like I have been doing my entire career, is community outreach, talking to constituents, people of Western New York, getting their ideas, their plans, what they care about most, and reporting back to the Senate and seeing how we can be helpful. And talking to community leaders and business leaders. So I think it's right up my alley because that's what I've been doing for years.
I'm the attorney for the Village of Faulkner, and how many people here remember the restaurant called the Golden Gloves? All you underage guys, shame on you. Anyways, you need to know that the Macy family and the Patty family and the Milner's family, they're all related. All related.
Which is ironic because we didn't know we were boxing. I mean, then boxing was in our family because my grandfather and Uncle boxed, as you saw in the video. But it was just kind of ironic that it was called the Golden Gloves, right? I mean,
We had a tough hombres in our family thing.
yeah.
By the way, you saw
Yeah.
in the film, we should pause here, saw in the
Yeah.
film the relationship between Joe and his dad, Jack. Here's Jack Macy.
Yeah, my
So-
father Jack is here. Very true, like the video says. It's all very, very true. He's kind of like my American Express. I don't leave home without him. But now that I've kind of ventured into politics, so to speak, he's no longer managing my career, but he's retired and he's bored, so he drove me today. He's very bored.
You started late in the game of boxing, age 19, and what kind of was the tipping point that said, gee, I want to get in that?
I don't know. I wish it was golf, actually. But, because my grandfather was a boxer and my uncle Russell were boxers, my father didn't box. He was smart. I don't know. But because they were boxers, my brother and I, and of course my dad, were big boxing fans. Any big boxing event on the television through the years, I'm young. I remember Ali fights in my living room, and then Larry Holmes, and of course Mike Tyson. We would have the neighborhood over, the family and friends, because we were fans of the sport, almost historians. We knew everything there was to know. Did I ever think I would box? Never. Never in a million years. I played football. I wrestled. I was a statesman in wrestling. Baseball. I was a pretty good athlete my entire life. But my brother was the real star. My brother was he was the prom king, the athlete. He was the man and the better boxer, quite honestly. But as the video mentioned, later on, after high school, we graduated 18 years old. A couple of years went by, working at a local restaurant, Jamaica Joe's in Tonawanda, going to college. I thought my athletic days were over. And my brother and one of our friends said, let's go downtown, Police Athletic League boxing gyms. You could go there and box for free and just fool around and hit the heavy bags. We were huge fans, beating each other up in the basement my whole life. My brother used to beat me up. So I said, let's go. And we went, and it just kind of snowballed. We started going every day, and started competing as amateurs. Golden Gloves came around. We were doing well. And here I am 10, 15, 20-0 as an amateur, thinking, this is fun. I'm going to pursue it a little further. And a few years later, the Olympics rolled around at the Atlanta Games in 1996.
Recently, they announced the termination of the Empire State Games, and yet that's really was one of your first medals.
It was. That was one of other than the Golden Gloves, that was my first big title. I won the gold medal in the Empire State Games, 1993, was it? And if I have any say, I will fight hard to make sure the funding is available for the Empire State Games, because it's New York's mini Olympics, and that's where a lot of athletes get their start, like myself. I won that gold medal. It was a very special day because my mother was there, my grandfather was there, who obviously later passed on, but he's the reason I boxed, and I got to give him the gold medal. And in the finals, I beat Hasim Rahman. I knocked out Hasim Rahman. Not many of you are boxing fans, but he was 3-time heavyweight champion of the world, and a friend of mine. So that's where I kind of thought I could pursue something here. I see something that I'm doing well. I didn't know then, really, but now I look back and I know that I made the right move in pursuing boxing and making it my life.
You talked about the history and the discussion of the history within the family. Buffalo has, in the 20s and 30s, just a deep history with Jimmy Slattery and Jimmy Goodrich and Rocky Kansas.
6 world champions.
Was that part of your discussion early on in your lives, that history, that legacy back in the 20s, 30s?
Yeah, Slattery and Khan, and there's some huge names. Buffalo boxing history is huge. We've had 6 world champions that many people don't know about. I was hoping to be the 7th. Back in the day, the Golden Gloves would sell out the old Memorial Auditorium, sell it out. Today, the Golden Gloves, I fought and won the Golden Gloves in Canastota in an auditorium that hold maybe 1,000 people, not 16,000. They're still big. I mean, the title in the Golden Gloves is big, but it just doesn't do what it used to do back in the day. Buffalo boxing history is huge, from the 20s up to, I'd say, the 60s, right up to Jimmy Ralston and the big names, Tony LaBarbera, the guys that didn't quite make world titles but left a local legacy with the sport, and that's what I hope to do. I didn't become world champion, but I am, all the while I was trying to keep my promise to stay in Western New York. I mean, this is not an exaggeration. The Don Kings and the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Bob Arams, the biggest names in boxing today, the promoters, offered me quite a bit of money to leave Western New York. They said, you can't become a heavyweight contender in Western New York. It has been happened since the 60s. And I said, no, I think I have the blank check at home from Don King, and he signed it, and we turned it down, and with a contract as big as this table. So we tried to read that in the airplane ride home. It was this thick, so that's another reason we didn't do it. But we said, we're going to stay here in Western New York. It's got a lot of great history. There's a lot of great sports fans here. And they laughed at me. They laughed at me, said, you'll never do it. And a few years later, about 3 years later, they were calling back, saying, can we come to Buffalo and help you out? And, we said, no, we're doing fine on our own here. So we proved them wrong. We became a world contender, and we did become the biggest ticket seller. I say we because the marketing genius over here. The biggest ticket seller in the sport of boxing in the United States. But he did not get punched. I will say he didn't take one punch. I took all the punches, so not one punch he didn't take. But so yeah, I mean that was part of my promise and continues to be my promise. Soon I'm going to be starting my promotional business and promote boxing to promise 2 things: local fighters and local fights. I could promote anywhere in the country or the world. They'll all be downtown, Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Rochester, Western New York, Jamestown. I'm going to promote professional boxing shows, and they'll be right here.
We'll have to show you the arena that we have here in Jamestown, which is really quite impressive. Before you maybe get out of Dodge or come
That would be
down,
great.
love
That
to
would be
show
great.
that.
We're going to keep them local.
Because I can see the promotional business. You've been described as this. Joe Macy isn't like most of the other pugs you'll come across in this game. As soon as he opens his mouth, you know he's different than the rest of them. He's articulate and insightful, and he expresses himself like maybe your neighbor, the school teacher, would. And that's fitting because, after all, he does have an education that allows him to teach school if that's the path he decides he wants to go down when all of this is over. He's not mean-looking or imposing like, say, Mike Tyson. And he doesn't particularly look like a fighter. His jet black hair, mahogany-colored eyes, olive-colored skin. And this is an article. I got.
Did you write this?
And I'm getting better. This is good. And look at the women. They're going crazy. This is what they say. Let me conclude this, girls, please. And handsome features make him look like any other unassuming Italian guy you might see making pizza behind the counter at your local pizzeria. This is what it says. While he's a big guy and in good shape, he's not a freakish giant with bulging muscles like a lot of these other heavyweight lurkings around the day. And maybe all that is what makes him extremely special. And this is an article about you. Is this an accurate portrayal of you? So,
You-
so
you
if I
tell-
were going down to Faulkner in the pizza parlor, you know when I say Baby Joe?
You tell me. I thought you wrote that. I don't know.
No.
No.
Very nice.
It's. I mean, a lot of it's fair. I mean, hence the nickname Baby Joe, which I've always hated. But I'm the youngest in the family. Even amongst my cousins, I was the baby, and I was the smallest. Believe it or not, I matured very late in life. Very late, and late in high school. I was just a little guy. I don't know why that happened. I was the baby of the family, and my grandparents called me Baby Joe even as an infant, right up till I was a teenager. So I remember my amateur career came to an end, and we made the decision to to turn professional. And I said, I get to decide on a nickname now, because in the amateurs you can't do that. Have a nickname. And I'm thinking of some really mean things, and my grandparents and my aunt and my father said Baby Joe. But I've heard Baby Joe so much in my ear that I'm thinking, Baby Joe, what? No way, I'm gonna get beat up in the locker room. Baby Joe, I can't. And they wouldn't have it any other way. So I remember my first professional fight in Harlem. It was in Harlem, New York, and they introduced me as Baby Joe, and I said, oh no, my God. But it has now stuck, and that's what people call me in not only the boxing community, but everywhere. So it is what it is.
Another article in the New York Times says, would-be Marciano faces test. How much was the Rocky Marciano Italian heavyweight champion? Was that part of your process?
It became part of it, yeah. As I became more and more of a fan of the sport, he became more and more of somebody that I looked up to. Obviously, his record, his undefeated record, 49-0, one of the very few heavyweights to retire undefeated. I'm one of the others, but he holds the records for the most wins. There was a little while I thought about challenging that record, but it would be too long and too hard and too many punches. But I then have had lunch a handful of times with the Marciano family in New York City, who are friends of ours and continue to stay in touch with us. And they gave me the blessing when I fought at Madison Square Garden. It was just a few fights back. If anyone's going to beat his record, we want you to beat it. And they continue to stay in touch with us. They were great. It was a great couple of days that we spent with them. They're a great family. And I have the Marciano life story that was just on MSG that I recorded. I've seen it several times, but he has a really great life story, and that's one of the guys that I wish to emulate, not only in the ring, but outside the ring as well.
You've fought in many big forums. Just curious, from a boxer's perspective, when the lights go flashing, the music starts sounding, and the announcers, ladies and gentlemen, Baby Joe Mason, you're starting to come down that aisle way. What's running through your mind as you're heading towards the ring?
I don't know. I've never been able to answer that question intelligently. I don't know what goes through my mind. It's a strange thing. I know there's a part of me that preferred to be elsewhere instead of Buffalo or West New York or HSBC Arena. It seemed like less pressure. But then, of course, after the win, you're glad that you were home. Like nothing is better than 18,000 fans at HSBC Arena. We did that 3 times, or University of Buffalo, 2 at Niagara Falls Convention Center before it was a casino, ECC twice. There's nothing better than fighting in front of your hometown, but it certainly does add pressure. TV cameras you could really care less about, but the audiences that I fought in front of certainly made me quite nervous. But I think that's what's different from me. Like I mentioned my brother earlier, a far better athlete. But you'd have to be an athlete or a boxer to understand this. He didn't quite have what it takes for the work ethic, and it takes something special. I will say this, to do what I did, because it was very, very difficult. And it's not only the training aspect, it's going to the ring and preparing yourself mentally for what you're about to do. And not everybody has that. My brother didn't have that inside the ring. What they call the capability to finish somebody. I don't know why that is, because I'm about the nicest, calmest. I really don't know how to. My pulse is very low. I have low blood pressure, and nothing gets me angry. I don't ever get angry. I don't know what it is, but there's something unique that it takes to go in the ring and do the job right. And a lot of people that are better fighters than me don't have it. And I said it in my political ads, and I say it throughout my career, that I was #1 in the world, and I've never lost. And I think legitimately a top 5 heavyweight in the world. Even today, I think, at age 35, I really believe that. And it's not because I'm the best fighter in the world. I am not the biggest. I am not nearly the strongest or fastest or the most athletic. I'm none of the above. I mean, these guys are sculpted so strong and so athletic, and it's crazy what the capabilities that they have physically. But they don't work as hard. They do not work as hard. They do not work as hard as I do. Maybe I had to work hard because, again, my brother and my best friend Eric were just tremendous athletes and were better boxers than me. I was the joke. The 3 of us went to the gym. I was the guy that went last, and let the little guy get in there and fool around a little bit. And that's how it was for me. I had to work hard, and I work hard with everything I do because I have to. I was a perfectionist. I stayed at that gym for an extra hour if I had to, and I got up an extra hour early, and I worked out 3 times a day, and it was physically exhausting. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I've played every sport in the world. It is the toughest sport there is if you want to be your best, and I did. And I think a lot of it is heart and work ethic. Right down to Mike Tyson. I don't share this much. You know, Mike Tyson, physically the fiercest boxer that ever lived. He had no heart. He never did. As soon as you hit Mike hard, and back, after the Buster Douglas days, his career was over. You realize Mike didn't have it. Mike didn't have it in the ring. The fastest, strongest man that will ever be in the ring is Mike Tyson, but he just never had heart. And I had something different where I got hit and got hurt or went down. Something made me want to fight harder. And in most guys in the boxing ring, they don't have that. And I'll say most. There's a handful, the Evander Holyfields, the true, the George Foremans, those kinds of greats, Oscar De La Hoyas, those are the greats. And I'm not a great amongst them guys at all, but that's what made me a little bit different. My fights got exciting the more that I got hit, if that makes sense. It wasn't. I mean, it's not a good thing to say, really. I should have practiced my defense, but that's okay. I lack defense a little bit, so.
Golden Gloves, three times New York State Golden Gloves champion, Olympics. What was that like, just sort of that Olympic process and the box off? You're in an area which we just sort of dream about.
It was political. It's very political. Amateur boxing, and boxing in general is political, but I was the new guy. It was great. The Golden Gloves, who would have thought? I won 3 Golden Gloves and then went on to the Nationals, and I represented the U.S. team for a while before the Olympics, going to England and, Costa Rica and Finland and Sweden and getting to travel the world. And it was great, man. It was just great. I was the new guy all the time. And the Olympic run, they had already spent their time and money on 3 or 4 other individuals that they assumed would make the Olympics in my weight class. But little Joe Macy came out of the white kid came out of nowhere basically, and started beating these guys, and they didn't like it, because they didn't spend any time and money and effort, and they didn't spend that on me, and I was beating these guys, and I look back at it now, and I know now. I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know who these guys were, so I just went in the ring, and I'd be sitting there with my headgear on and say, "Joe, you're next." I'd go in there and beat him and come out and not even know who I was fighting. I didn't know any better. And I would come out of the ring, and they go, "You just beat Lance Whitaker. You just beat Lawrence Claybay and Tom Martin, and these are our Olympians next year at the Olympics." I don't know who he is. So I didn't know any better. Now I look back, and I should have been much more nervous going in the ring, and I probably would have lost. So luckily I didn't know. But I won the Olympic box-offs in Oakland, and I was the Olympic alternate. Lawrence Claybay then beat me on NBC, my first nationally televised fight, and my first time I got knocked down, too. So that was a rude awakening, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me because I thought I was kind of getting invincible, maybe a young, cocky kid. And I had the whole family over the house, and it was on NBC, an afternoon. The winner of this fight goes to the Olympics. The night before, I beat Lawrence Claybay very badly. I said, I got to beat him one more time. It's just him and I'm going to the Olympics. I can't believe I'm going to the Olympics because 2 years ago I was serving fish fries. This is crazy. So, and he beat me, and he beat me bad. And it was the best thing that happened to me because it slowed my career down. I said, because I started late and I was the new guy. But I did get to represent the United States as an alternate, and that summer we traveled the entire United States as the Olympians with Fernando Vargas and Floyd Mayweather and Antonio Tarver and all these great names that are good friends of mine. But again, I was the alternate and treated as the alternate. But then when that summer ended, the Atlantic Games ended, I turned professional, and here we are.
When you turn professional and just the process, and I'm sure probably better addressed to your dad than anything else, but how do you select the timing, the competitors, because you certainly have your own timetable, and how do you determine what that timetable is?
It depends on the person and on the fighter. We move slowly because I started late. And I rushed. I had about 80 amateur fights, half of which were in 1 year. 40 fights in 1 year, even though you're an amateur, that's a lot. I didn't know what these other athletes knew. So we moved slowly. Our first 15 fights, I say slowly. We would do monthly. We'd fight monthly. But as far as our competitive level, our competition, we moved slowly. They're tough kids, but I needed to gain more experience. Sometimes we were criticized for it. But matchmaking is a real talent in the sport of boxing. And we had a great guy, Bob Spagnola, who did that for us. And after our 15th fight or so, they started getting more competitive, as they should have been. And then I continued to stay lucky.
The whole world, at least certainly the whole Western New York world, watched your fight in Las Vegas. As just clearly dominated the first 8 rounds, and then the 9th round. Kind of walk us through that, if you can recall.
I was hoping you could. I don't really remember much.
I was just going to say that. Maybe I'll get jacked. But.
No, that was a great night or time in my career. Obviously I was, I fought at Madison Square Garden. I'd fought in other countries, and I had no reason to leave Western New York because we were selling out HSBC Arena, and all the heavyweight boxers and promoters wanted to come to Western New York because of what we were doing, which was great. But I did tell my dad and my team, we still got to fight in Vegas. That'll just make my career great. It'll just top it off. So we did, and we had our contract with HBO, and we were the co-feature to Shane Mosley and Winky Wright, 2 of the biggest names in boxing at the time in 2004, March 13th. And I was fighting Vasily Jurov. Now, Vasily Jurov was a cruiserweight. That's 1 under heavyweight. He was undisputed cruiserweight champion, held all 3 titles. One of the best cruiserweights, in my opinion, and in many people's opinions in the world. He was an Olympic gold medalist, and in the 1996 Olympic Games, he won the Best Boxer of the Tournament award, beating Antonio Tarver, beating a lot of big names, again, in the cruiserweight division. But he decided to move up to heavyweight, had a couple of successful heavyweight fights, and then it became my turn. He was going after the heavyweight title. People would say, why are you going to fight this cruiserweight? He's a little smaller than me. And if you know boxing, I'd rather fight the bigger, stronger guys. That's the way I was better at fighting the bigger, stronger guys. The smaller guys were faster and caused me problems throughout my career if you knew boxing. I was pretty fast, but the faster they are, that's the advantage that they have. And he's very fast, and he's very strong, and he's left-handed. And I don't like left-handed people. Just kidding.
You may leave now.
If I see a sign left-handed, I think immediately, man, I'm going to get hit with that left hand all day. So, but I did very, very well. That's the best fight. That's the best performance of my career. And many people kind of cringe when I say that because he's the toughest guy that I fought. I hit him with everything. He didn't even take a step backwards. I have so much respect for him. But I was clearly winning this fight, clearly winning it every round, hands down. I'm going to win a decision easily. The first 8 rounds, he barely touched me. And at the end of the 9th round, with approximately 12 seconds left, as the video shows, he hit me in the back of the head, and I took a knee. And after that, I really don't. It was foggy. It was just foggy. And this is boxing. I've been hit hard before, and I've been foggy before in sparring, and it happens. But the 10th round, I just don't remember. I don't remember the 10th round, and I probably would have easily. I did win, but would have much easier won the fight if had I just moved around and just stayed away. But as I mentioned earlier, kind of the animal instinct in me, I thought it looked bad that I took a knee, even though I was winning the fight easily. The bell rang and I went right out after him, and people were wondering why I did that. I don't know why, because I don't recall. But you know, and the last round looked awful. I got knocked down 3 more times, and it made it a close fight. I won it unanimously, but you know, by very close points. And you know, a few days went by, to talk about the injury now, but a few days went by and I had a little headache and I was still a little foggy. And I'm an advocate for safety. We have always been that way. Believe me, my mother made us that way. I spoke to groups much like this throughout my boxing career about safety. The fact that we have to get tested before every fight in order to get licensed. And my argument was, well, we need to get tested after our fights. This is before my injury. We need to get tested after our fights. This will prevent injuries in the future. I used to always speak on that note, and I always got tested after my fights, including this one, and luckily I did. Luckily I did, because we found an injury. What if I went and fought 2 months later? Who knows? Like I said, everything happens for a reason. So we did get tested, and they found something. A subdural hematoma, not a brain injury, not even a brain bleed. But the dural, there was a little dot about as big as the top of a pin. Now, I'm not trying to minimize my injury, because a head injury is a head injury. And I didn't know anything about it. So we researched it, and we sought out the best doctors in the country, in the world, and went to visit them in other cities, in Boston, in Florida, all over. Julian Bells and Dr. Robert Cantu, the best neurosurgeons in the world. And nobody I visited, no doctor I visited, said that I shouldn't fight again. They said, you're fine. This happens all the time in boxing. This is like a concussion. And every injury needs to be handled case by case. So as we researched it further, educated ourselves, saw doctors, MRI after MRI after MRI, rested, made the decision, you know, this is okay. I've researched this, and I think that I could continue. So we fought hard to continue, because the Nevada Athletic Commission said, if you have an injury like this, you can never fight again. And again, I'm all for safety. And there are many fighters that I would say that should never fight again. Many fighters that had an injury similar to this that should never fight again. But mine was different. Mine was not as serious. I took the right precautions, and that's why we fought hard to regain our license, which we did. Although Nevada and New York, the 2 places that we want to fight, would not issue us a license. So we fought elsewhere a handful of times. And as I decided that if we can't fight in Nevada and New York, we kind of kept getting shot down in certain places. Some places wouldn't even look our way or accept our applications. So we said enough's enough, and we don't want to be treated this way. So, but it is what it is. It looked bad in the media that we were pursuing something because of the head injury. It was made out to be worse than it was. Again, if you're in a car accident or something, or some even boxers have sustained injuries that I think they shouldn't have continued their careers, but I thought otherwise of mine.
But about a year ago, you had a fight scheduled, and you had an injury to your arm and had to pull out. Did you know then that that was it?
No, I didn't know, because physically, I could still fight. You know, at 35, today, 35 isn't that old, not in the heavyweight division. And I matured late in life, physically. I matured late in boxing. I think I could still beat 95% of these guys. I really do, because I've matured so late as an adult. I'm so inexperienced. I had one tough fight against Jurov. Actually, one tough round, 3 minutes. I walked through most of all my guys as an amateur, as a professional. It's not like I've been beaten up as a professional. You know, I'm an educated guy. I really do think that I could beat a lot of these guys today. I know who I can and can't beat. That was the one of the best things about my career that I never thought I was the greatest thing. I know who I'd fight anybody. There's not anyone that I wouldn't fight. But I know who I can beat and who I can't beat. That Klitschko, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to beat him. James Toney, he's not my style. Hasim Rahman, Mike Tyson, I think I could beat them today, not the old Mike. Muhammad Ali today, I'll whoop him. So I'm very realistic. I'm very realistic. So I never thought I was the best, but I'll even in the media, like I'll fight Klitschko. I'll give him hell for 4 rounds. After that, I don't know. I might end up in the 3rd row, but I'll fight anyone. But I was always real realistic, and there's probably 4 guys right now that I think that would give me a real hard time. And that's today at 35 years old. I have other plans in life. Look, I wanted to be world champion. We came close. We were #1. We were undefeated. I'll be completely honest. If I could still fight in New York at HSBC Arena, I probably would have never ran for office. Not until later in life, anyway. Not that I even needed to run for office, but I mean, my road would have been different. But but I have other aspirations, like the community, and now like politics, and I want to promote boxing. I want to broadcast. I want to stay close to the sport. I have other passions, my foundation, the Baby Joe Macy Fight for Organ Donors. There's other things that I'm very interested in, my education. So I have other goals in life.
Talk about your foundation.
The Baby Joe Macy Fight for Organ Donors is something I put together in 2001. And the reason is my cousin Janelle Shanner lost her life battling for a kidney transplant. She had kidney disease. My mother had a liver disease. She had lupus. My family has had some illnesses, but it was Janelle, for the most part, that struggled, having 2 transplants that didn't work. And I learned more and more about the need for organ donors as I started researching it and watching her suffer, and thought that there are 25,000 people in upstate New York suffering from some sort of kidney or liver disease and waiting for transplants. And this could be handled so much easier if people just sign their license, sign organ donors cards like I have in my wallet, and become organ donors. I'm not asking you to give up your kidney now or give anyone your arm. Just, sign your organ donor card. And that's what we do. That's what this foundation does. I raise awareness. If I go to high schools and talk to seniors, you're getting your license now? Sign the back of it. Sign your organ donor card. We raise awareness for the importance of organ donation. And I didn't until Janelle was suffering, so I signed mine, and now that's what I do is I talk on behalf of the foundation. We raise awareness, and we raise money through events, and then we in turn, donate to local hospitals that do organ transplants. And there's a few, Strong Memorial, Kenmore Mercy, or hospitals that procure organs. So that's what we do, and we continue to raise awareness, so please look into it and talk to your doctor and sign your organ donor cards and keep in your wallet.
Before we conclude today, I'll have a presentation. But I thought we'd pause just for a few more minutes while Joe's able to be with us, see if there's any questions with anybody. Bill?
Broadcasting career, you're perfect for that. Are you thinking of ESPN, or is that in your plans?
It is. I mean, my fingers are crossed. See, I could do sports. I'm a sports enthusiast. Boxing is my specialty. Having said that, there's only a few jobs, few and far between, HBO, Showtime, ESPN, or something locally. HBO called and said, when George Foreman was retiring, his last fight was Madison Square Garden. It was the night I fought. And he came in the locker room and said, I'm retiring, and he wanted to wish me well as I wished him well. And there was an open spot there. Now it's Emmanuel Stewart. But they called me to try out for it, among other names like Lennox Lewis and Arturo Gatti, and guys that I really like and I think are great people. And you watch them, and I think that they're terrible on the microphone. But I know that I'm better than them, but I haven't left the legacy that they left. You understand? So it's difficult for them to choose me over them. I mean, that's Lennox Lewis, that's Arturo Gatti, and that's Oscar De La Hoya, and rightfully so. And ESPN, I go back as a guest every few months, which I enjoy, sitting with Brian Kenny in the studio. I work for an independent pay-per-view company, Sports and Media Entertainment. They do monthly boxing shows for $19.99. You get on pay-per-view, and they're good fights. And I'll sit side of Al Bernstein And I really do enjoy doing that. But full-time, it's kind of difficult to do. But I might locally start a weekly boxing program or sports program I mean, possibly Eric Molds, Rob Ray. These are guys that I've spoken to and are friends of mine that we want to continue, like the Enforcers, Ruben Brown and Rob Ray. Those are fun shows, so I'd like to do that as well.
Other questions? Yes, Bruce.
What effect do you see on boxing by MMA and UFC?
The popularity of MMA and the UFC is heavily taking over boxing. It is right now. A lot of it is boxing's own fault. You know, I was asked outside, what could we could do to improve the sport of boxing? And there's a lot. The first things I would do, less titles. There's all these organizations, WBA, WBC, IBF. There's too many organizations. There's 5 champions in every weight class. There needs to be 1 champion. And there needs to be less weight classes. Every 3 pounds, you jump into a different weight class. It's starting to confuse people, and there's 1,000 champions right now. In the 60s, 70s, that's when boxing was a real sport. When you were in the top 10, you were a top 10 fighter. You know, if it were 1970, I don't even know if I would have ever made the top 10. The top 20 guys were killers. You know, I got lucky in my timing. But so that's what I would change the sport of boxing. MMA and UFC, it's funny, when I was campaigning, and I got a few calls from assemblymen and some senators because they're going to be voting about whether or not to pass UFC in the state of New York. I don't know how that's going to go down, but I'm not a huge fan, quite honestly. Boxing is age-old sport, and some of the best athletes in the world, and I was a wrestler, and I'll find myself watching it from time to time, the UFC. But what I tell the legislators is if it's going to bring in the revenue, then vote on it. You know, it's entertainment, that sure is, you know. So that's my thoughts. It's definitely, the popularity of it is huge right now.
Other questions? What's your highlight, Joe?
Highlight of my career?
Yep. Other than being here today.
Here, this is one of them. The Olympic torch was one of them. They selected me to run the Olympic torch for the Salt Lake City Games, the Winter Olympics. That was New Year's Eve, that they chose Buffalo, which we thought was great. Geez, the Olympic torch had been running for 2 months previous to Buffalo, but on New Year's Eve, we're going to run it through Buffalo. Wow, that's great. And then I got the call. I saw that on the news. They're going to choose Buffalo. Great. A month later, I got the call. They want me to run the torch. Wow, that's great. I'm honored. And then I get a call. You're going to be the last one to run it from midnight down Chippewa Street when there's going to be 25,000 people. I'm like, wow. I mean, I really was honored. And I didn't know then what it meant. Let's put it that way. I didn't know then what it meant. I was honored. I thought, that's going to be fun. I told him, that's going to be fun. And then that day, we were all dressed in our white, all the torch bearers, and we had so much fun. I remember being with Kevin O'Connell, and a war veteran that lost his arm. And just great stories, I mean, of these people that I couldn't believe I was amongst these people. I'm thinking, wow, this is a bigger honor than I ever thought. And I'm chose last. We're on the bus. There's 40 of us on the bus. Each one gets out. And oh my God, we were just chanting and screaming. It was so much fun. And then we had 7 feet of snow. The 2 days before, they actually thought, we're going to close Chippewa. That's how much snow there was on the side. We're going to close Chippewa. We have to cancel this. It was on the Today Show. It was on the Today Show. We might have to cancel this. And I was getting a little nervous because I was realizing how big it was. But that day it was great because I ran down Chippewa and I turned into where the electric building is there, Niagara Mohawk building, and there was 25,000 people. And I thought it was freezing. It was freezing, and there was snow everywhere. I thought, I'm going to run. There's going to be 2 people down there. I mean, we shouldn't have did this. They should have canceled it. And it was one of the biggest New Year's Eve's party celebrations that they've ever had. So that was one of them. And then, of course, we had 3 fights at HSBC Arena. The one that was on HBO, DeVarrell Williamson, that was our best crowd. That was one of my biggest wins. And part of the reason is the behind-the-scenes story is DeVarrell is a friend of mine, and that's how I treat some of my friends. But DeVarrell, people don't know that through the amateurs, DeVarrell and I were very close. DeVarrell was a big name in amateur boxing, a national champion. And when I became in the national scene, DeVarrell was my roommate. DeVarrell took me under his wing. DeVarrell and I chummed around together. I was just baby Joe, and he introduced me to everyone and taught me how we travel. This is what we do. This is what our schedule is. And I looked up to DeVarrell DeVarrell was a heavyweight. I was a super heavyweight in amateurs. He turned professional. He went to heavyweight. Now we're in the same weight class. We kept in touch a little bit early in my career. Now it came to the point later in our careers, we're both contenders. And now the winner of this fight is going to elevate themselves to like a top 5 position. And we lost touch a little bit, but I always looked up to DeVarrell and watched him on TV and thought, geez, I'm going to fight DeVarrell. This is great. I'm thinking, I know what he's thinking right now. Joe, I brought Joe up. I mean, I brought Joe up. He used to beat me up sparring. I'm telling you the truth, he used to beat me up sparring. And I'm thinking that what he's thinking. He's coming here. He doesn't care how big the crowd is. He's thinking he's going to whoop me. But as I watched him and became more of a student of the sport, I realized DeVarrell was the same fighter that he was 6 or 7 years ago, as I watched the video of him and his previous fights. And my trainer, who's the De Leon brothers, I'm telling you, the best boxing trainers in the world, because I'm not the best fighter, and they made me. They made me from day one. I learned a lot, and DeVarrell just stayed the same. And that's how most of the fighters were. Not that they're not good fighters, they're good fighters, but they're the same. If you've seen them once, you've seen them all the time. They're just the same. But throughout my career, you could watch my videos. I learned something every fight, and you could see it every fight. And again, not that I was doing everything right, because I wasn't, but I learned something every fight. And I think DeVarrell was shocked that it only lasted 30 seconds, and because that's what he gets for beating me up for 3 years, So that's kind of a special. I have a plaque. We were amateurs in Milwaukee. It just sits in my office. It was a weekend prestigious tournament. I went the first year. It was the first annual of a tournament in Milwaukee. And DeVarrell was a heavyweight. He won his division. I was super heavyweight. I won my division. And they give a beautiful plaque to the outstanding boxer. Of course, 1995, that goes to DeVarrell. DeVarrell gets everything, And his name is, he gets a plaque. 1996, he and I go back. We both win again, but I got the outstanding boxer this year. So in my office sits the 1995, says DeVarrell. I get the 1996, so it says both our names, but next to it is a great picture of DeVarrell laying on the mat for when I got him, because it's just a little payback for DeVarrell. He's a great, great kid. He's a very educated, very nice kid, but I think I surprised him more than anyone that night. So that's.
Did you autograph a copy of that picture to him?
He doesn't talk to me anymore.
Yeah. Thinking of you, Joe Macy. I just want to say on behalf of everybody here, this has just been a special afternoon. To Jack, thank you so much for bringing your son down, for being so much part of his life. Well, and Joe, really, it's not an overstatement to say that you are the third franchise in Buffalo. When we think the Bills, the Sabres, and an individual by the name of Baby Joe Macy. I mean, congratulations, a tremendous, tremendous career. And we wish you nothing but the best as you go into this next chapter of your life. And thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'll say real quick, I'm born and raised in the town of Tonawanda. Councilman Joe Eminger back there, our good friend, and I just want to say that I love the sport of boxing. That's what I do. But I realized somewhere along the line that boxing really was just the tool. My goal has become the community. I was fortunate enough to travel the world and meet so many great people. I mean, I've been on private jets, and I've also been with boxers that are starving for the next meal money. I've met great, great people. I've been in great homes, and I've had a great career in traveling. But Western New York has always been my home. It will always be my home. And I started getting involved in the community and realizing what my real purpose is. And it's to help people out in the community, whether it's raising money, whether it's through my foundation that has been saving lives. I got an email the other day from Denver, Colorado, of a fan I never met, a young woman. Her uncle passed away in a car accident. But he's always a boxing fan and loved watching me fight, so he donated his organs. These are the emails I get. And, as much as I love boxing and now, whether it's politics or not politics, my goal is Western New York, whether it's speaking at high schools on a weekly basis. That's what I really enjoy doing, what I really realized on a more of a spiritual end of things. Boxing is just the tool that God gave me to reach out to people. So that's what I want to say. So thank you so much for having me.